Next presentation is Technology in the Kiln-Formed Glass Studio. Our guest tonight is a visual artist from the Ottawa area. She works with kiln-formed and flame-work glass. Her glass designs have traveled internationally, and she travels through Canada and the UK to teach her unique skills. Today she's going to talk about how she took her studio from a traditional workshop into incorporating different design elements. And please welcome Jennifer and Kelly.
Hello. Just gonna acquaint myself with the clicker here. I think we're good. Is it this? Yeah, good. Great. So I'm just going to give you a little journey of starting out without any technology in my practice or any modern technology in my practice to incorporating a lot of computer-assisted technology. When I graduated from university in 1992, and I used an electronic typewriter to write all my essays, so I didn't even have any computer experience in '92, and that's when I started with stained glass and using very, very traditional methods. This is what my studio looks like now. I use sheet glass, crushed glass, kilns. I have 6 different kilns, and then I use very traditional tools. So that gives you an idea of what I'm using to create in the studio. This is the sort of thing that I was designing and making in 1992. Very traditional leaded stained glass. And then over the years, I got more involved with kiln work and melting glass in kilns. And as a result, I received a request to make glass for Cirque du Soleil. At that point, I had no experience doing production work at all. I was only ever working with one-of-a-kind handmade pieces. And so Cirque du Soleil asked me to create 12 different designs for them. And when they sent me their first purchase order, it was for a couple hundred of each design. So I, by hand, was creating all of these designs. And as you can imagine, after a couple of years of creating, I completely burnt out, and I didn't have the overhead, because of the time it took to make each piece, to be able to hire people to help me. If I had known about, for example, CNC jet cutting, I could have jet cut those pieces and cut my time probably to a third, and been able to keep producing these pieces. But lessons learned, I did not know that at the time when I was working away, creating all of them by hand. Another process that I've been doing over the years is casting, and again, this is before 3D printing, so everything was done by hand out in a shed. Now we can do so much with scanning and 3D printing in order to create models for glass casting. And so my real eye-opener came last March. I was at Bayview Yards doing a residency there in their makerspace. And so I learned Illustrator in about a week. I only had Photoshop experience before that, but learning Illustrator allowed me to create a series of crowns. Some of them are out on the table here. The crowns were all cut flat first. You can see they're all formed now, but they were all cut flat first using a CNC water jet. The reason they're crowns, it's a metaphor for technology being accessible to everyone. So the traditional symbol of the crown is only for a select few, but in my mind, the highest and best use of technology is to allow equal opportunity for everyone. So that's where the design came from, and all of them run on a theme of equality. The water jet cutter is pictured here, cutting the tiara of keys that's over there on the table. And so then after they were cut flat with the water jet, I took them back to my kiln and still used my traditional heating methods. Okay, still using my traditional heating methods to form the crowns into shape. And then this particular one is my pride crown. And so it, throughout every single process, I wasn't sure if it was going to survive, but it's really the masterpiece of the series because it also has the Raspberry Pi programming on it. And so its lights are programmed to rotate through sound. And if we had it on, it would be going like crazy right now. So any sound makes the lights go. And it also has a music button on it too. So, and it's one that is wearable as well. So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Erin Kennedy, Robot Girl. She is, if you look up robot missions online, she designs open source robots to clean up garbage on beaches, and she's usually at Westboro Beach every summer. So definitely check out Erin Kennedy. She's wonderful, and she's the person who taught me how to use Raspberry Pi and how to program it. So that was a lot of fun. And the interesting tie-in is that, of course, the soldering here was the one thing that wasn't a steep learning curve for me because I had started with leaded glass way back when. So then that brought me to the courage to be able to think of other bigger projects that I wouldn't normally have thought capable of doing. With the knowledge of what CNC operating machines can do, I then realized that I could propose much larger ideas and be able to stay within budget, and using these technologies would mean that I'd actually be able to stay within a reasonable timeline. So this piece is the original sketch I did by hand on a public art proposal that I can't mention yet because it's still in the process. They're a little bit delayed in their announcement. But the bell that's sitting on the table there is the maquette. And that's the wonderful, whoops, there, oh, sorry. So I'm not sure if that's going to rotate at all by itself. It should be video, but in any event, you get the idea. That is a proposal for a 6 foot wide by 6.5 foot tall glass and aluminum bell. And I had the good fortune of knowing David Clark, who it's always good to have friends who are engineers. I firmly believe that. So David Clark was able to print a maquette for me in the makerspace. So we also had, I'm not sure, there we go. I also had a video done so that the entire piece could rotate, and again, this would be rotating, so that I could see exactly what it looked like. I've got papers down on the table there. How I was able to collaborate with Ian Shea. I printed out all of the sides of the piece and still drew out by hand exactly how I wanted the piece to look like, and then he translated it into the video, and then David Clark took my design to the makerspace, and the large, if if you've been in the makerspace, the large 3D printer that sits on the floor, I think it was 2 days that it was printing away in here, and there's the picture of it in the 3D printer. There were some limitations because, oh, and there are the pages that I drew by hand in order to get the design the way I wanted it. There were some limitations with doing the maquette in that scale. I had to use a hot knife to cut out some of it just because it was so fine, it was too fragile to be printed. But other than that, it was 2 days, and then, to be honest, 2 days of cutting glass in order to cover it in the glass. But it was otherwise an impossible feat to be able to create an actual miniature sculpture within the timeline I needed to present it. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and the full-size piece will also be water jet cut. All of the aluminum will be water jet cut for that piece, and some of the trickier angles in the glass will also be water jet cut using the CNC machine. So there's the finished piece. Because it's much smaller, the glass is much denser than the full 6-foot scale. So lit is really important to see a little bit more what it would look like as a large piece. And then my next step for incorporating technology in my studio is working more with light technology. I have a real fascination with light reflections, with glass specifically, of course. So I'm working on learning more about programming algorithms for LED lights, and the concept of creating a three-dimensional sculpture and having that reflect into a two-dimensional image on the wall. So that is the next project. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Please help yourself to the examples out on the